Good evening. Let's call to order the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Board of Directors meeting of Wednesday, June 11th, 2025 at 7:01 p.m. May we have roll call?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. I will start with those participating in the room at the dais. Director Elahi.
Present.
Barbadillo.
Here.
Mohan.
Here.
Showalter.
Here.
Scozola.
Here.
Vice Chair Klein.
Here.
Walia.
Here.
Rennie.
Here.
Lee.
Present.
Meadows.
Here.
Swan.
Here.
And participating remotely, Director Hilton.
Here.
And I am going to promote very shortly Director Martinez-Beltran. Director Martinez-Beltran, are you present?
I'm here.
Thank you so much. We have a quorum of our board.
There we go.
Thank you. Next up is public comment on matters not listed on our agenda. This is an opportunity for the public to provide comments on any item that's not listed on our agenda this evening, but is in the subject matter jurisdiction of SVCE. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. Are there any speakers remote or in the room wishing to speak under public comment? I see none in the room. Is there anyone remote?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our consent calendar. Does any board member have any item that they'd like to pull from consent? Is there any member of the public wishing to speak on a consent calendar item? I see none in the room. Is there anyone remote wishing to speak on a consent calendar item?
No hands raised.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Good.
Second.
Thank you. So Walia made the motion, Lee second, to approve our consent calendar. Would you please conduct the roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Klein.
Yes.
Scozola.
Aye.
Mohan.
Aye.
Meadows.
Aye.
Swan.
Aye.
Rennie.
Aye.
Barbadillo.
Aye.
Elahi.
Aye.
Showalter.
Aye.
Walia.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Hilton.
Aye.
Martinez-Beltran.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Next up, we'll move on to our regular agenda. And first up is item 2, the CEO report.
All right.
Monica?
Good evening, Standing Chair Klein and directors. All right, well, we will start with my favorite part again, and that is to provide you with some announcements about some employee promotions and new staff. Starting with Kaylee Dodson. She has now moved over to the Power Resources team as a rotational power analyst. She was on the senior energy service specialist on the customer success team. And so she's looking forward to learning all about planning for power procurement and settlements. And then I want to introduce 2 new staff members, starting with David Shim, who is our newest senior finance and data analyst. And he's going to be in the finance and admin team, reporting directly to Scott Rigglesworth, but part of Amrit Singh's team. And so we invite David to come say a few words to you. I think you need to turn the mic.
One moment. I think the mic isn't completely on.
Maybe try talking closer.
Hi.
There we
Hi.
go.
Okay. Sorry. It's great to meet y'all. My name is David Shim, and I joined the team here as Senior Finance and Data Analyst. My prior work experience includes managing the financial and operational processes for hedge fund and private credit fund managers, both here in San Francisco and in Hong Kong. I'm a Bay Area local, graduated from Westmont High in Campbell, and did my undergrad at UC Berkeley, majoring in economics. In my spare time, I like hiking, running, and spending time with my wife and 2 kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, I told him to make sure that he mentioned he went to Cal because we know how Tyson loves to introduce people, welcome people to Cal. Well, our very next introduction is from Megan LeBerth. She's our new summer intern, and she'll be on the data and analytics team. Megan also went to Berkeley. So, Megan, you want to say a few words?
Hello. Good evening. I met a few of you over at Aki, which was very nice. And as Monica was saying, my name is Megan, and I was hired on, or as an intern on the data and analytics team. Sorry. And I just actually graduated from UC Berkeley from the energy and resources team with my master's. And in my free time, I just got a new puppy actually, so I've been walking her around a lot and finding all the new dog-friendly cafes in the Mission District. So. Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you. Welcome, Megan.
Okay, next up, we're going to have Baina Chang, our Director of Government and Legislative Affairs, to provide an update on some of the legislative bills that have been in the works.
Good evening, board members. Baina Chang, Government Affairs Director for SVCE. Wanted to give you an update on two important bills that we have been following tonight. First, wanted to talk about SB 540 by Senator Becker. As you might remember, this is the Regional Energy Markets Bill that would form a new governing body to allow us to better trade energy with the rest of the West. So good news on this bill. Recently, it passed the Senate on a 36-0 vote and is now in the Assembly. We continue to have conversations in the Assembly on softening the language of the bill to address some of the concerns that other Western states have posed and make it clear that all states can continue to set their own energy policies under this new regime. I really wanted to thank members of the board, especially those from the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee who have been helping to advocate on this bill. Really happy to see it continue to move forward and are optimistic that we can get some good language changes in the Assembly. The other bill I wanted to update you on tonight is AB 306 by Assemblymember Schultz and Rivas. This, as you might remember, is a moratorium on state and local building codes. And the latest on this bill is that amendments came out today on the bill. The amendments haven't yet addressed our main ask, which was to allow local governments to continue to adopt existing building reach codes. However, in one positive development, one of the amendments that happened today pushes back the start date of the moratorium from June of this year to October 1st of this year. This now provides a potential window for local governments to adopt one last round of reach codes before the 6-year moratorium sets in. So we will be talking to you later on in the agenda about the actions that member agencies can take and can talk more about the plan going forward. Just wanted to mention this is obviously still an evolving issue. The bill is in the Senate Housing Committee. We remain very involved and are advocating. CalCCA took a oppose unless amended position, really to ask for existing building reach codes to continue to move forward. And just again, sort of thank the board for your interest in this, and then we will be reaching out if we need additional advocacy support. Happy to take any questions.
Is there any questions from the board in the room or remote? I see none. Thank you very much. Thanks for the update.
Okay, the last item I want to highlight in the CEO report is our education initiatives. And tonight we have going to provide you a presentation from our Climate Corps Fellow, Ashley Pock, on our efforts here. So Ashley Pock is the Community Outreach Fellow who started at SVCE back in September through the Climate Corps Fellowship Program. Ashley has overseen the annual SVCE education initiatives, and she is here this evening to share some highlights from several of these engagements, which support students, climate education, and schools, and the schools in our community.
Hello, good evening.
1 second, yeah,
You have to turn it on.
Okay.
there we go.
Hi, I'm Ashley, Community Outreach Fellow at SVCE, and I just wanted to share with y'all some of the highlights from our youth education initiatives this year since the start of my fellowship in September. So I'll be highlighting 3 different initiatives. Next slide, please. The Student Sponsorship Program, the Pilot Education Nonprofit Grant, and then the Empower SV Scholarship Competition. So starting off with the Student Sponsorship Program. Next slide, please. So this was formerly known as the Education Fund, and this is the 5th year that we're doing this program, and students can apply for up to $10,000 in funding for student-led projects that relate to the SVCE mission. So this year we were able to distribute around $70,000 to 13 different student project groups in 8 different SVCE communities. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to highlight one of the projects that we have this year. So this is the Eco Valley Helios Garden Festival group, and they are designing solar light installations at local community events and senior homes to beautify and bring light to dark walkways. And their goal is to showcase sustainable art and also educate people about different clean energy options through their installations. Next slide, please. The next program is the Education Nonprofit Grant Program. So this is a pilot grant program for education-based nonprofits, specifically focused on climate education, community workshops, and workforce development. So we were able to distribute around $96,000 this year to 4 different nonprofits listed there on the right. And then one example of what this grant funding is used for is the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action 2025 Youth Leadership Summit happening later in August. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, I wanted to share some highlights from our annual youth scholarship competition. So this year we hosted a music and art competition for students to submit songs and art pieces that relate to clean energy topics. And we awarded $20,000, broken down into 4 $3,000 grand prize awards and 4 $2,000 honorable mentions. And of those 8 scholarship recipients, 5 of them performed live at Campbell Boogie Fest in May to a panel of judges. And we were lucky to have Director Scosola on our judge panel. So I just want to say thank you for joining us. It was such a fun event. And it was the first time we were able to include an in-person component since before COVID. So that was really exciting. And then this last slide shows the grand prize recipients of the scholarship competition. And then I did have a video that I wanted to show of Joshua Ryu's Gatherers of Light video submission. He won the Best Performance Award.
If we don't have the video available, we can send it later to the board. Yeah, we'll follow up on that. But thank you, Ashley.
Of course, yeah, that's all the video submissions and also the student sponsorship projects and the nonprofit grant recipients are in the appendix at the end of the slides for reference. But yeah, I just wanted to end by saying that it was a huge honor to work on these programs, and I think that they're super important, and our students are going to be our future leaders and homeowners. So I think investing in these programs has been really amazing, and I hope that we can continue to expand and experiment with these education initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Let's see if there's any questions from the board. Any questions remotely? No. So thank you. I definitely agree. You know, it's dealing with that next generation and getting them involved and, you know, ultimately focused on what our mission is. So thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I did also want to highlight one event coming up. It's in the CEO report, and this is the 16th annual California Climate and Energy Collaborative Forum being held in San Jose on July 9th through 10th. So I know that Director Lee is one of the speakers at that event. I saw you on the speaker list, and as am I. And so we will send out more information about this event to the board in our post notes. We'll also have the Dream Home there too, if you haven't already seen it. So we'll send that out.
We
All right.
plan to, if I could speak, or actually it might be somebody in my office might speak as possible, either one of us. But it'll be
Okay.
covered, yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, that concludes my CEO report, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Monica. Are there any questions for any of our speakers from the board? I see none. I see no one. I see no one in the room. Is there anyone remote wishing to speak under public comment?
No hands raised, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the update. Next up is item 3, adopt a resolution to authorize the CEO to approve or execute agreements with the firms providing services to initiate Silicon Valley Clean Energy to execute its 4th prepay. And Amrit will be speaking. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'm bringing back prepay. Some of you might have missed this. I think, Javed, you were here when we executed the first one. I'm pleased to say we're on our 4th prepay now. So we're doing it 4 times with some improvements and enhancements. I would like to acknowledge, I think online I have Mike Berwenger from PFM Financials. He's our municipal advisor, and he was our municipal advisor for the first 3 prepays as well. So he's joining me for this presentation. I think he's online, and there are any detailed questions that the board has, he can certainly fill in. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So this is an action item. We're asking that the board adopt the resolution so that we can authorize the CEO to engage with firms to enable us to execute our 4th prepay. Now, one thing I want to say that this is not, we're not seeking final approval. As you know, the prepay requires a lot of work. We're actually coming here so that once the board has the opportunity to see it before a final vote on this most likely at the August meeting. So what we're asking right now is to authorize the CEO to at least engage with these firms so we can do all the necessary work to prepare all the documents that are necessary to structure the prepay. But the final execution authority that the board will grant will be likely in August when we come back to the board. Part of the reason is, there's a lot of work involved in doing so, and we want to make sure that we have the clear direction before we engage with them. And as I will get into the presentation, most of these services are, the payment for these services are contingent on successful execution of a prepay. If that were to occur, if that were not to occur, we are not obligated to pay, with the exception of one area, which I will note in the presentation. So I will start. It's been a while since we have brought this topic to you, so we'll go through some. In the past prepay, we had some materials that were in the background in the appendix. We're bringing some of that back in the main presentation to refresh what a prepay is and go over the structure of it a little bit. And there's a lot of details in the appendix. I'm sure you've read them, about the 3 existing prepays that we have, which I'd like to add that they provide about $14.3 million in savings on an ongoing basis for us right now. Okay, Andrea, we'll go to the next slide. So this is one of the background information. Remember, the goal of the prepay is to reduce the cost of power purchases, right? And the way we're able to do this is because as a governmental entity, we have access to low cost or tax exempt debt. And I want to emphasize, and I'll get into this later, we are not actually directly issuing any debt, but we're able to, through this mechanism, take advantage of the fact that we have access to low cost tax exempt debt. The mechanism has been around since the 90s. It was predominantly used in natural gas transactions, We have brought it to clean power electricity. I'm pleased to say SVCE, we did our first deal in partnership with AVA. We were one of the first deals to be executed in the CCA community, and shortly thereafter, Marin executed theirs as well. But that was at the time groundbreaking for us in the CCA community. But now, as I'll get into it, there's been a number of transactions that have occurred since that first transaction. Again, so this has been around since 1990s. This is codified in U.S. tax law, so there's nothing unusual we're doing here. And again, this is guided by seasoned professionals who help us negotiate and structure these transactions, and Mike Burbanger being one of them. Go to the next slide, please. So at a very high level, before I get into a little bit into the mechanics of it, the goal, again, is to reduce cost of power through this mechanism. This I would want to highlight is a competitive advantage. This is not something that our main competitor, PG&E, has access to because they do not have access to tax-exempt debt. So this gives us a competitive edge in our power procurement area. How do we do this? Again, I alluded to earlier, we get access to tax-exempt debt. And through this prepay mechanism, we partner with a entity that doesn't have access to tax-exempt debt. And we were able to basically extract the difference between these two rates. And through this financially engineered mechanism called prepay, basically float that savings into our power procurement, into our power purchases. I'd like to emphasize, as with our existing deals, prepaid deals, there's minimal risk to us. If the structure were to fall apart for any reasons, we go back to business as usual, which means buying energy from our counterparties as we do today. Only thing we will forego is the discount that the prepay enables us to do. And the bonds, again, so we have no financial obligations on the bonds that are issued. They are called non-recourse. In other words, they will not be on our balance sheet. Next slide, please. Okay, so here I get into a little bit on the mechanics, and this will be a lot of repeat for most of you. If you can see, I've labeled them the steps. Don't feel like you have to read all the text on the slide there. That was meant for you to, that was there for you before you came to the meeting. I'll go through the main points on the PowerPoint slide. So currently on the step one, we have a existing power purchase agreement with a counterparty, right? So existing PPA. And currently, let's say that one of these parties, many of you have been to, the ribbon cutting ceremony, so you know the counterparties I'm talking about. We have, let's say, a solar plus storage deal where we pay a fixed price for energy, let's say $50 a megawatt hour. So currently we pay $50 per megawatt hour for the energy that they deliver. Under this prepay structure, what we do is actually partially assign that contract to the energy supplier, which in our case happens to be Morgan Stanley. Okay, so we assign it to them, and Morgan Stanley says, okay, I will pay them the contract price of $50 a megawatt hour. Then they take that same energy, they float it to CCCFA. CCCFA, California Community Choice Financing Authority, is a separate legal entity from us, but it's an entity that we CCAs created, and SVCE was one of the initial founding members of CCCFA. It's basically run by CCA staff on a time basis that we dedicate to CCCFA. So CCCFA, on behalf of us, issues the bonds. Again, the bonds is also non-recourse to CCCFA. If anything were to happen, they are not obligated to the bondholders. So they issue the bonds, they collect the proceeds, they pay the proceeds to Morgan Stanley in the form of a prepayment for that energy that Morgan Stanley is now going to deliver to CCCFA under an agreement called Prepaid Supplier Agreement. Then simultaneously, we execute a power purchase agreement with CCCFA. It's very much back-to-back, same agreement that they've executed with Morgan Stanley. Through that mechanism, we get our energy back from that counterparty routed back to us. But in return, we don't pay $50. We pay, let's say, let's say we get a $10 discount. The last prepay we did, we got $11.32 a megawatt hour discount. So let's say in this case we get $10. Instead of paying $50, we get to pay $40. And again, where is that savings coming from? It's because the funding recipient, which in our first three prepays was Morgan Stanley, they were able to get tax-exempt debt as opposed to a taxable debt where they would have had to pay higher interest rates. So that differential we basically capture in flow, and that's how we get the $10 discount. That's how we've done our first three prepays. What's new in this fourth prepay is I've added a box number 7, where in the past the energy supplier Morgan Stanley was also the funding recipient. In this case, we are saying we're going to do under what's called an SPV structure, special purpose vehicle, where we get to choose a funding recipient. You know, it doesn't have to be Morgan Stanley. It could be Morgan Stanley. They can bid into it. But we get to choose whether we go with Morgan Stanley, another bank, insurance company, whoever else is interested in these bonds. One, it gives us a choice. We may get better indicative pricing or savings from another funding recipient. The other thing it does, it kind of diversifies our risk a little bit from Morgan Stanley. The funding recipient is the key counterparty in this transaction. If the funding recipient, like during the financial crisis, Lehman Brothers, they went under, the prepay would fall apart, and we would go back to business as usual, which means paying this counterparty $50, whereas in the prepay structure, we pay $40. So we will lose the savings that we're getting. So we want to diversify a little too. So this new structure enables, this new structure for us for the fourth prepay will enable us to do so. Okay, next slide, please. So the request at this point, again, we will come back for the final parameters of the execution. We expect that to be in August, is to engage with these firms so that we can structure all the transactional documents that we can bring back to the board in the August meeting. So one is the PFM financial advisor, municipal advisor. We are required to have them. And the other are counsel, counsel to bond and tax counsel, disclosure counsel. And the third one, the first three, as I said earlier, are contingent on successful execution of the deal. Even after board gives us the authority in August, if for some reason we don't transact, and because we can't meet the board authorized parameters, or we don't like the savings we're getting, we can basically, and the deal doesn't go through, we are not obligated to make payments to them. The Moody's Investor Service, once we initiate a credit rating with them for our prepay, we are obligated to pay them. But for that reason, we are not going to engage with them until we have more certainty, as we did in the prior prepays, that there's likely to be a successful execution. And Morgan Stanley, as they've done for the first three prepays, has agreed that they will, in the very unlikely event, if that were to happen, they would split that with us. And we haven't had it in writing yet, but they have verbally agreed, and they have agreed in the past three prepays. Next slide, please. So these are some of the fees. I'm not going to read them for you, but this is the fees that are required. They're pretty much in line, and actually on an expected basis, slightly lower than some of the underwriting fees than we have done in the prior transactions. This is with the Morgan Stanley as a prepaid supplier, and they will also be underwriting the bonds for us, as they've done for the first three prepays. Next slide, please. Again, we get to leverage. When we executed the first prepay, there were multiple presentations to the board, multiple presentations to the finance committee. Some of them we have actually documented in the staff report as in the appendix. We get to leverage and benefit from them. And since we executed our first three prepays, we've actually been very busy up until the end of last year, basically meeting all the obligations of assigning counterparties to that prepay. A lot of work done by Zach Liskey, who's actually partnered with me on this transaction. And also we restructured a lot of the way we settle on these prepays. There used to be something called monthly settlements. We moved to an annual settlements. I'm not going to go into a lot of the mechanics of that, but what basically that does is basically makes us more efficient in the way we assign PPAs into the prepay structure. Therefore, basically, we can get, for fewer megawatt hours assigned into it, we can get more dollar savings. So that's a very important mechanism we've implemented with Morgan Stanley, and sticking with Morgan Stanley enables us to do so for this next prepay. And also there's benefits in the keeping the energy supplier same with Morgan Stanley, because we get to pool the assignment of contracts in this one pool with one energy supplier, whereas if we were to split them, there's some inefficiencies. Basically what that means is we would have to assign more PPAs, use more megawatt hours for the same dollar savings, which would reduce our per dollar megawatt hour savings. Okay, and just to point out, as I alluded to earlier, since we've done that first transactions, there's been many CCA transactions, and there are transactions right now that are in the pipeline. Some ahead of us, some probably will come after us. But to date, there's been over 18 billion of such deals, and CCCFA is actually nationally recognized as one of the big bond issuers in this space. Next slide, please. So for this prepay, when we did the first prepay, we did an RFP, and for a lot of good reasons, we selected Morgan Stanley because of the flexibility they provided for what we needed to accomplish in that. But since that, as I mentioned, there's been a lot more prepays that have been done, and we also wanted some flexibility in the funding recipient so we can diversify some of our risk, the concentrated credit risk, the example I gave there with Lehman. So we did a RFP. We selected Morgan Stanley. There were several capable firms, but for the reasons I've already covered, the efficiencies of keeping the energy supplier pool, because of the efficiencies we gain, where we get to maximize per dollar megawatt hour savings using fewer amount of assigned megawatts for that same dollar amount of savings. But we still get to choose our funding recipient under the slightly different structure we're going, where we don't have to stick with Morgan Stanley as a funding recipient, but we can choose another bank or any other party that may be in some of these other CCA deals. Insurance companies have been the funding recipient, so we get that benefit. Next slide, please. So these are, in summary, the expenses. Were on an expected basis. We expect to spend close to about $1 million. Again, these are contingent, with the exception of Moody's, as I explained it before. And all of these, including Moody's fees, will be net. The savings that I described, like for the last prepay, $11.32, was net of these proceeds. We don't pay out of pocket these costs. They will all be funded and finalized through that bond proceed mechanism. Next slide, please. In terms of load, with the three prepays that we have, we've covered about, where we get 14.3 million in savings a year. We've covered about 40% of our load. With this next prepay, we expect it to be similar in size to our third prepay. It could be about 10 to 15% of our load, or 17%, somewhere thereabouts. So there's still opportunities to do more, but each prepay we do, we have to fine-tune our portfolio. We have to time it as to when the PPAs come in. As this board is well aware, there's a lot of uncertainties in the timing of when PPAs come in. And also, there's some, we can't just, each megawatt hour we cannot assign, because these are intermittent resources, and in prepay, there has to be a fairly high degree of certainty of delivery of those energy. So we are not able to assign all the megawatt hours. It has to be at a high confidence level, like 95%. Okay, next slide, please. The physical impact, again, when we go to market is when we will actually know what kind of savings we're going to get. As an illustration, we could get anywhere from $4 to $6 million. We're at 14.3. We could very easily be add this could bring us to around $20 million of saving a year. We will know, again, depends on the market between taxable and tax-exempt rate. Rightly reiterate all the fees are contingent on successful execution with that caveat on Moody's rating fees. And the bonds, against, we don't have any obligation. They are non-recourse to us. They're not on our balance sheet. We do have a footnote disclosure of this arrangement that we have with CCCFA, but they're not on our balance sheet. Next slide, please. So next step, again, we've actually already initiated initial discussions with these parties. We're going to work to structure the transactions. We will come back to the board. Our expected timing is August after our board approves. Then we have to go to the CCCFA board where Monica is one of the members on that board. We have to get CCCFA approval. After that, then we'll be ready to go to the market. And that will depend on the timing and how the market is and whether we can realize our board met parameters or the savings that we're expecting. And that's when we will initiate with Moody's and issue the bonds. I think the next slide, that pretty much wraps my presentation. This is what we're asking for your approval at this time. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any of the directors have questions? First up, Director Meadows.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you, Amrit, for that, shall I call it, comprehensive presentation. So if I understood that, then my question will make sense. And if my question doesn't make sense, then you'll know why. So looking at, this is our fourth prepay, that much I followed. No, you said Morgan Stanley, well, there's a lot of commonalities between the players on 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Are these prepays siloed? But it sounded like you were telling us that Morgan Stanley is common and we get some sort of discount by their activity in the other prepays. And so if one domino falls, are others affected, or are these siloed mechanisms? Did you follow my question?
Yes, I think I do, and it's a very good question, and that's what actually led us to change our structure. So again, if we put all our eggs in one basket, Morgan Stanley goes away. There's no additional risk to us than business as usual before we did any prepays. All our PPAs will come back to us. We pay our original contracted price. But when the savings are getting right now 14, hopefully 20, and then some, if this counterparty were to go away, that would be a significant amount of savings that would go away. And as I said, the key in this prepay transaction is the person who gets the money. The bondholders know who's got my money. In fact, the credit rating that the bonds will carry will be that of the funding recipient. So that's a key party. If that party falls apart, like Lehman during the financial crisis, all of our savings would go away. So we have an opportunity to diversify from Morgan for that reason. Morgan can still participate. It's for us to make that decision, whether we want to take the credit risk, given the savings they're giving us, or we want to go with another funding recipient because either they're giving us a better rate savings, or maybe not as better, but we get to diversify from this concentration risk. But there are other aspects. One is the underwriting side, underwriting the bonds. That service is pretty comparable against any of these big investment banks. And that's pretty much done at the initial get-go. And then the ongoing relationship we will have in Morgan Stanley or one of their LLCs, Morgan Stanley Capital Group, is the energy supplier. Where in the diagram where our counterparty, we route the energy to them, and then they route it to CCCFA, and then they have an agreement with the funding recipient. If they were to go away, I will say that this has not happened yet, so a bit untested, but at least there are provisions that we can go out and replace them. So there are provisions that we can, and they don't play that it's an important role. It has to be there. Without them, the structure would fall apart for us. Our savings would go away at least. We're still looking at all the various elements of this as we're right now exploring this structure. And Mike is an expert. He can chime in if needed. But the key is that the Morgan Stanley LLC, we have with 120 days that we can go out and find another entity. We can go to Goldman, another bank, and they basically will collect a fee, like $1 per $1.10 per megawatt hour, just doing this somewhat of an administrative task for us. Mike, did I miss anything that you want to add?
No, sir, that was very well covered.
So that means, if I can try to paraphrase my understanding, that means that the prepays are not truly siloed the way that we have them constructed, but you're managing the risk for that component where it is. So they do have a interrelationship.
Yeah, the interrelationship, sorry, I did not address that part. That comes from the pooling arrangement. When we have one energy supplier, in our case, Morgan Stanley, we get to take a PPA, chop it up amongst all three, and now 4 PPAs, right? But if we start another pool, there's inefficiencies. And that's where I strand some megawatts that I can now cycle through a prepay. That's where I lose savings and I undercut future execution of prepays. So there's some inefficiencies there, and a lot of efficiencies. And there are other structural reasons. With Morgan, I talked about the settling of energy on a monthly basis. We've moved to an annual basis. That saves us a lot of megawatt hours. That we have done with Morgan, and we have done that successfully. Other prepaid suppliers out there says they're willing to do that. I don't doubt that. They can do it. But as my understanding is, and Mike can correct me, Morgan is the only one so far who has done it. And we already have all these contracts and arrangements in place. But that pooling gives us a lot of benefits. And also from an administrative perspective, but more so from the squeezing as much value out of each megawatt hour that we have in our portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Can I maybe just add, if I think I understood the question a little bit different? So if for whatever reason we do another deal with Morgan Stanley, and that Morgan Stanley's credit is still good, they're still an entity, they haven't gone bankrupt, they're A-rated, but if for whatever reason that particular deal, the fourth prepay goes away, dissolves, it doesn't affect the first three. The first three still stand. So there's no cross default on any of these.
That's
prepays.
correct. Yeah, maybe I could just say it a little differently. Each of these is financially siloed and credit siloed, right? What Amit was describing is there's a commonality on the operational side for energy purposes, but for purposes of counterparty default, they're all individually siloed. So if one transaction one has a problem, that doesn't necessarily create a problem for 2, 3, or 4. But the commonality with 1, 2, and 3 is that Morgan Stanley is the credit link. Your fourth transaction, as Amrit has described, is sort of diversifying that credit. So the fourth one will be somebody different, is what we expect, so that if that entity had a problem, it doesn't necessarily cascade over to the first 3.
Thank you. I appreciate all of this clarification because I think I was asking aspects of all these questions because I was hearing pieces of it. So thank you for helping straighten that out for me.
Thank you, Director Meadows. Next up, Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair. Amrit, thank you so much for simplifying such a complex subject and also for directors who are new on the board this year. Some of us have been here for the last 3, so it's a little easier to comprehend this very complex system. 2 very simple confirmations kind of questions. So thank you for your responses to Director Meadows' questions. In a way, what I'm hearing is, besides all the details that you helped us understand, there is a key difference between the energy supplier and the funding recipient, the number 7 there. And that diversification is going to help us mitigate the risk further.
Right.
Okay. And my other question, do I understand it correctly that really the only risk which we are not paying right away, in any case, is to pay Moody's at some point in time for an amount of $321,500, and the potential for savings is going to be $4 to $6 million per year for us?
Yeah, that's an estimate. We won't know, and it depends on the market. It could be larger, it could be smaller, but we will have a board approved minimum when we come in August. If we don't achieve that minimum, we will not execute the deal. And again, Morgan, we will initiate. Moody's, we will only initiate when we have a lot more certainty that there's a likelihood that we will execute the transaction. And as I said, Morgan Stanley has verbally agreed, and in writing for the last 3 they've done. I'm pretty sure they will follow up with the writing soon, that they will split that should that unlikely event were to occur. And that's part of the reason why they're willing to split it, because it's it is kind of a low risk event.
Right, and that's all I wanted to put things in perspective, that it's pretty low risk, and we have the added benefit of having working on this thing with Morgan Stanley for the first 3 prepays, and this is the 4th one with the same entity.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up is Director Mohan.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amrit, for the presentation. This is the second time I'm hearing it. We heard it extensively at the Finance Committee meeting. And a couple of questions which I forgot to ask at that earlier meeting. Since this is the 4th prepay, do we still track the earlier prepays in some way, or when we're done, we're done?
No, each of these prepays have, I should have mentioned, these are 30-year transactions.
Right.
But they have an initial pricing period, because that's how the economics works out better for us right now. So you can think of it as the bonds will reprice depending on the term. And the initial repricing period could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years. So the first transaction we did, I took notes here, was for a 10-year reprice period or reset period. The second one was for 6.5. And the last one we did in 2024 was for 8 years. So each of those, we're still actually on a monthly basis settling all the volumes, So there's a lot of back-end work going on. We were assigned the energy and all these cash flows the arrows in that diagram, all the cash flows flow through that. So all of that is happening. And then what will happen is when the reset period comes in, we will basically reprice. At that point, we will get to reset the savings going forward thereafter. And we have a repricing agreement that specifies a minimum threshold that we have to reach. So we could get out of them if we don't reach those minimum thresholds. But most likelihood we are going to renegotiate and we'll get savings going on.
So we keep going back to make sure it's on track, and we could renegotiate. Is that what you're saying?
When the initial reset periods, the pricing of these bonds. So like I said, the first one was for 8 years.
Right.
When 8 years happens, we will basically reprice. At that point, we will get a new dollar per megawatt hour savings for over the next reset period, maybe.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah, it sort of makes sense.
Think of it as refinancing your bond so we will reprice these, and we will get a new rate, which will then basically establish a savings rate going forward.
And my second question is, at which point do we see these savings?
We're for the first 3 prepays, we're saving them right now. Every year, we're saving $14.3 million. So every month, actually, we get our discounted price for the energy.
Okay, so the 14.3 million is for all the prepays, right?
Yeah, if I add the savings for the existing 3 prepays on an annual basis, that's about what we're saving. Yeah.
And we would see the the savings reflected on a regular basis?
They are reflected. They're part of our accounting right now. We account them as lower, even in our financial statements, the audited financial statements, those savings are in there. They've gone through the auditing process. They're recorded as lowering our cost of energy procurement.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Next is Director Barbadillo.
Good evening. I'll try to simplify if I understand what prepay is. So we're going to use somebody's money to buy energy and use the transaction for discounts so we save costs. Is that a simplified way of saying it?
Yeah, what we're doing is basically we're using our ability to access tax-exempt debt.
Right.
And you can think of it in a simplified way. We're giving that access to, let's say, an entity. Let's say Morgan Stanley is the funding recipient, as they were for the first three. We're giving Morgan, you can think of it in a simplified way. We're giving Morgan Stanley ability to issue tax-exempt debt. And there's an appetite for California tax-exempt debt because we're a high tax state.
Mm-hmm.
So Morgan is now, they issue taxable debt. You can think of it as now through us, through this mechanism that's approved in codified in law, they can issue tax-exempt debt. And they get a savings. And then they said, okay, SVCE, I save this much. And they give that savings to us, which we flow through our power purchase through this mechanism that's been set up.
All right. And the savings that we're generating increases our purchases for power on the same dollar amount. I think that's the explanation that I heard when you have that graph for 11% of the extra power that we buy based on the savings that we got for each prepaid.
So, yeah, I may not be answering you, so feel free to ask me again. We buy the same energy we would have bought with the counterparty, right? So in the example, I think I said that we would pay $50 per megawatt hour for that energy. Now we're able to get the same energy, but let's say we get a discount that amounts to $10 a megawatt hour, so we pay $40. Mm-hmm. So this is an ability for us to benefit from our tax-exempt status without actually taking any debt on our balance sheet, but still benefit from it.
Right. I understand the concept. You said, you buy it at 40, you save 10, and that 10 used to buy more energy on the same dollar amount that we used to spend.
Yeah, or savings. Right. It just goes to our customers.
Right?
Yeah.
So here's a question. So we're claiming to have that savings, but we also have costs. We are engaging these three third parties at $1 million for what? About 3 to 4 months engagement. What other costs does this prepay entails in addition to what we're spending with third parties? And now let's see what's the net gain, what the net savings.
So all the costs that we're spending, if you look at our appendix to the power presentation, and maybe we can, if you want, we can bring it up. We can show you in the past. There's underwriting fees that, depending on the size of the transaction, whether it's $1 billion or $850 million, whatever the size of the bond execution happens to be at the time we issue, will dictate the bond fee. I think we've asked permission for $5.50 per bond. I think these are on par value of $1,000 or so. They go. So that will dictate how much underwriting fees. So it's going to be like $5 million or so. And you can look at each of our previous prepays, what we've paid. So there's those fees, there's these fees, and then there are some other minor fees that I've also listed in the staff report. When we engage, for example, when we go to get green bond certifications, these are like $25,000, $30,000. There's a trustee fee in the similar amount. There will be a commodity swap fee party, and there will be an investment advisor fee. So they are minor fees, but the main thing you have to remember is all of these when I give you the savings for prepay number 3 of $11.32 a megawatt hour, that is net of these fees. And these fees come out of the bond proceeds. We are not writing checks. They come out of the bond proceeds. And so they basically, then net of that is what savings we get. If we don't do prepay, we don't get that $11.32.
Right. And there are repricing of these bonds on a certain timeline, right?
Yes.
And that's why we're saying that the savings is contingent to the structure process and the market.
The market, very much so, yes.
And that's why you have that figure for 3 to 6 million or above.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Like one of the best savings was one of our CCAs that went earlier this year. They got one of the good savings. We got very good savings in the last prepay. We were very pleased. But then the market closed. You know, we had the Liberation Day, mechanics going on. There was a lot of financial uncertainty in the market. And lately, I believe a prepay, MCE prepay may have priced this week, right, Mike?
Yes, on Tuesday, yesterday.
Yeah, so this week another CCA prepay close. So market has opened up, and we can't predict the market, you know, so it's very much, the actual savings is very much dependent on the market.
Okay, so it's a non-recourse to SVCE, but there should be a catch. So is the catch we're bounded on the repricing whenever that happens?
Sorry, repeat that part,
Right,
last part.
You said that the bonds are non-recourse with SVCE. So there must be some financial catch to that.
Yeah, initially when we go through this with initial, there's a lot of that type of question. There's no catch. The mechanics is as it is. And as I said, we've done 3 prepays, and a lot of CCAs have done it, tune of 18 billion and growing with the recent execution. Basically, it's a structure that's codified in tax law. It says we have access to tax-exempt debt, you know, and rather than obligating us to take that debt on our balance sheet, build a solar facility on our own, we do it through purchase agreements. Right. We're able to actually, without taking on debt, use that access to that funding to advance clean energy.
Maybe I think, and maybe it's a Mike, or you can answer this question. I think the question is at the repricing, whether it's 7 or 10 years, whatever the structure is, do we have a guaranteed savings at that point that would support the initial cost of whatever initial costs we have that come out of our pocket of the prepay?
So
I think Mike was going to try to answer it.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I could jump in. I would say, yeah, at reprice, you know, in year 8 or 10, depending upon where we end up, you have a guaranteed minimum that will be about 5%. So if you're above that, you'll stay in the transaction. If you're below that, you have the right to walk away from the transaction at that point. So you do have some protections. You know, there have been remarketings for these transactions. A lot of them have done quite well. Many of them have actually outperformed their original savings, but you are subject to, you know, bond markets 10 years from now. So your savings could go up, could go down, but they will not go below 5% at that point.
Who guarantees that a floor, that it will not? Because, you know, if we have that, then we're a bit secured even if the market plays.
Yeah,
So
it's in the contracts. There's a term called guaranteed minimum savings. It's in a remarketing agreement within the contracts that will be before you in a couple months.
Right. So who will be ultimately responsible for the bond should things fail?
Yeah, great question. So I think Amrit mentioned that the bonds will actually be rated the rating of the entity that receives the funds, that funding counterparty in box 7. So what that signifies to the investors and what that represents contractually is that that entity is who the bond investors, the folks that buy those bonds, will be looking to that entity to repay them should there be a problem. They would be required through a termination payment to CCCFA. They make a termination payment, and then those are the funds that are available to the bondholders in the worst case scenario. Bondholders have no recourse, as Amrit has pointed out, they have no recourse back to Silicon Valley to repay the bonds. You're only paying for power that you receive. If you don't receive the power from CCCFA, you don't pay for anything. And that causes the termination. And that entity in box 7 would pay that termination payment to the investors.
Okay, so that's the security that we have. Okay. All right, last question, right? We're claiming savings. And as always, even when I was new in this board, right, my ultimate question is how will it redound back to our stakeholders, to our consumers? Have we felt that for the last 2 years that we have this prepay program? We've been boasting 14 million in savings. Have we shared that to our consumers?
Every financial obligation, every financial savings we make is on behalf of our customers.
Right.
So,
well, you know what I mean. Bring
yeah.
it to a bill at the end of the day. Is there something that
so
they
we
can
do
feel?
These are funding the programs that we're talking about later this evening and all that. So these are the decisions that the board makes. Sorry to break in.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's the 4% under right now. So it's providing energy cheaper, but it also, the big portion of that is all the different programs that we're funding from a board standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, decarbonization of our different communities. That's where a lot of these savings are going.
All right. No, I was fully briefed by Amrit on a meeting. I'm just trying to figure out, and hopefully we stay on track. Yes, our goal is to decarbonize and make energy cheaper and more available to the consumer. But at the end, I would also want to share, what on my one vote, what we are saving, what we are trying to do, that redounds to a tangible that these consumers can feel, which is, of course, the reduction of rate.
Yeah.
I understand there's at least 4% below what PG&E should have had charged consumers, but with all these things that we're talking about, savings and whatnot, right? Hopefully there will some percentage of it that will redound back to add more to that 4% savings that consumers have.
Yeah, and if I may make one note here, for this fiscal year, with the last budget that was approved in March, mid-year adjustment, we actually upped the discount with the bill credit we're going to be offering in August. So on an effective average discount basis, it's more like 10% for everyone, and even much higher, more than 30 some odd percent for our low-income customers.
Wow. Glad to confirm that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Director Elahi?
Thank you.
Mike?
It feels like deja vu here for me, I guess. When you guys did your first prepay, I struggled trying to understand it, and I'm glad I was there at that time.
Is this mic on?
Director.
Yeah, so I'm glad I was there at that time, and I appreciate your input. And congratulations, you guys are doing a great job on these prepays. The spreads are probably better now than they were when you did the first prepay. So hopefully you can make more money, there'll be a better margin for you guys. The one thing I wanted to understand is you had an 8-year prepay and a 10-year prepay or something like that. Is this going to be a 30-year prepay, or is this also going to be limited?
They're all 30-year.
They're all 30 years.
They're all 30-year. We get to reprice them at these respective dates, and the repricing period is basically what gives us the biggest spread. So we look to Mike and also Morgan Stanley. They will tell us good term for this. Last deal we did was 8-year term, 8-year reset period. The first one was 10 years. So it depends on each prepay where we can get that optimal spread between taxable and tax-exempt
But you have a
rates.
right to do it anytime within the 30-year period, or is it like after 5 years or after 10 years?
No, at the reset period.
So there's a specific reset period in every agreement.
Yes.
In which, and on this one, it'll be how many years?
We don't know until we go to the market, and they will be advised by Mike. where the best spread is, and what that reset period would be.
Okay, so based on what the best spread is, if it's over 5 years, you
Yeah.
do a 5-year spread. If it's 10 years, like when you do a CD with a bank, they'll tell you 6
Exactly.
months or 12 months or 24 months, and you get the
Exactly.
best one.
Yes.
So you set that up as your reset. Okay, I get that. And the other question I had was, you have a new block, number 7. So this wasn't confusing enough, you wanted to put one more thing in there?
Yes.
So right now, Morgan Stanley is both the funding recipient and the energy supplier?
For the first 3 prepays, yes. So now we get to diversify that funding recipient risk for Morgan Stanley. We have the opportunity and the right. Morgan Stanley can still participate to be a funding recipient, but we can make that decision at that time.
So it's something you'll negotiate? And
Yeah,
either
we can.
If they give us something-
If they give us a huge savings and we say, well, A-rated counterparty, what's the risk? Maybe we'll come to the board. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see how that plays out, whether we want to take that risk, or if and this happens in the energy transactions, right? We have credit limits we set with counterparties to avoid concentration risk. So it's kind of similar in that terms.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, directors. Any other director questions? I have a quick question. As far as the thresholds for each of the 4 entities that we're looking at setting up agreements, was that a negotiated price? Is that based upon their level of risk that they want to undertake, or how were those levels set?
So we've had experience for the first 3 prepays, and we went through RFP process for municipal advisor and the bank, the energy supplier, and the same as the underwriter for the bonds. The underwriting fees were very, very comparable across. So were the energy supplier servicing fees. So that was not the driver in decision making. And some of the other smaller entities, we did not do RFPs because these are legal services, and they're very much niche players with a lot of depth and expertise. I believe every CCA transaction has probably been executed with these, not always the same. There may be some differences, like we've used different bond and tax counsel for the first prepay than the second, and there was for some other reasons because we had some legal conflicts because of something going on in the energy space, with our PPAs. So,
Okay. That was all of my questions. Thank you to directors for basically, especially for the newer directors. I understand it takes a lot to understand this, and I appreciate the presentation. It helped cover a lot of that. With that, we'll open up public comment. I have no speaker cards in the room. Are there any remote speakers wishing to speak on this item?
No hands raised, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll close public comment, bring it back to board for final questions or a comment or a motion. Director Lee?
I'm ready to move, if that's okay, Chair. Move to adopt a resolution to authorize CEO to execute agreements to initiate the 4th prepay and approve engagement with Morgan Stanley as the prepay supply.
I second.
Thank you. Director Walia, second. And did that capture all of, want to make sure that captured all of staff's recommendation?
Did he say the resolution?
Did you say the resolution also?
No, it says adopt resolution 2.
Okay.
The most important 3 words. Yes,
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any final comments? So before we get to the vote, I just want to thank Amrit, and all the board members. It is a very big thing from our standpoint, but it's providing margins. It's looking at that margin market and for us, savings that we can then apply to rates, to decarbonization. So thank you for the motion. And with that, can you please conduct a voice vote?
Yes, thank you. I would like to confirm with the maker of the motion that this would also include to approve engagement with Morgan Stanley as the prepay supplier.
That's correct.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will proceed with the vote. Vice Chair Klein,
Aye.
Director Scozola,
Aye.
Mohan,
Aye.
Meadows,
Aye.
Swan,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Barbadillo,
Aye.
Elahi,
Aye.
Showalter,
Aye.
Walia,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hilton,
Aye.
Martinez Beltran.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4, results of the stress test analysis. Amrit, you're back up.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so now I get to bring another favorite topic this time of the year. It's time to do stress testing. Not to stress us out, actually to keep us out of stress. All right, so we'll go to the next slide, please. So this is a discussion item. We present the findings of our stress test analysis. Most of you are familiar. We do this on an annual basis now. And this is part of our enterprise risk management framework. I will acknowledge up front, a lot of these slides had a lot of words in them, a lot of details. Hopefully that was to make the reading of them easier, but I won't necessarily go to touch on all of them. But I have brought back a lot of the some of the, we have done financial stress tests similar to this in the past, just about every year. In some other years, they were supplemented with other areas we were stressing as well, because stress tests can not just be in the financial area. But I brought some of the earlier messages forward in this one so that you'll see why I've done that. Hopefully it sets up for the recommendation we'll make towards the end. So I will touch on them, and feel free to ask me any questions at what level of detail you want. If it's too repetitive, let me know. I'll move along. The plan is that we'll touch briefly on the enterprise risk management framework, and stress test is a component of that. We'll go through the 5-year base case forecast. The last time we had a 5-year base case forecast was when we did the mid-year in March. We will do a comparison as to what the base case, not the stress case, the base case looks like at this time. As you know, the market prices always move. Even though I do projections one time, the very next day prices are different. But we have to take a snapshot, and some of that will be in my presentation. Then I will go into stress tests. How did we design the stressful financial condition? And by design, let me tell you, stress tests are meant to be extreme, not something you'd face each and every day. Extreme, but plausible, something we should plan for, that if they were to occur, do have the financial means to withstand, so that we are in business, in the long-term business of carrying our mission. It just comes to mind, and I want to share it. Last time the stress test was in the news, I think, was when Silicon Valley Bank got in trouble. Remember, their interest rates all of a sudden went up. They were not always low or declining. Comparable for them, it was interest rates. For us, it's market prices, stressing adverse movement in market prices. So I will then compare the updated base case with the stress case, and I will recap some of the messages and then the recommendations we're making. Next slide, please. So the first part, again, we'll begin with a quick review of the enterprise risk management framework. So this diagram lays at a very high level how we go about our planning process at SVCE. We started with a comprehensive enterprise risk management framework. We have a formal process where at least once a year, we get the entire organization to, from bottoms up, walk through all the risks. Of course, we manage risks and opportunities on a day-to-day basis. That's what running a business is about. But this is a formal, more strategic, sit back, think through all the areas that can affect our mission. Either we can advance or it can set us back. Then there's a link to that in how we set up our strategic focus area, which Monica is going to go through in August. And then, of course, there's a link where we want funding aligned with making sure that we manage with those risks and opportunities in mind. Next slide, please. Some of the key frameworks: we have a risk register. This is a living document that we maintain of the agency's risks and opportunities. Then we have a risk matrix or a risk rubric. Key thing in a risk is, we want to assess at least in 2 dimensions. What's the likelihood of an event happening, and if the event were to happen, what were the consequence? Because we cannot always address every single thing. We have to prioritize, right? Those that have a bigger impact on the organization is what we want our focus on. And then stress test is a key component of that, because in our practice, in risk management, similar to financial portfolio risk management, but I would say much more complicated in the energy space, there are standard risk metrics, and they're not going to always prepare you well for disruptions in, let's say, market price. So that's why we test extreme cases that can occur that have low likelihood, probably less than 1%, but if they were to happen, and they have happened in the past, as I'll talk about, they could have a severe impact on us. And another terminology we've used, and it's used in the industry, is black swans. I'm sure, that's also common these days. You'd hear that in other spaces. Next slide, please. So the key financial risk that I'm going to talk about that can have the biggest impact is actually the fluctuations in market prices that can affect our revenues. Okay, so this is a key slide in understanding that. How does that market movement translate into revenue risk? If you look at the diagram on the left, we share this with just about every budget presentation we do. The blue box there, the rate that corresponds to that blue box is what determines our revenue, right? That rate times our volume, that's the price. The volume is our quantity. Price times quantity is our revenue. There's something called PCIA. Most of you are aware. PCIA is what PG&E charges our customers. And the concept behind PCIA is when our customers were part of PG&E customers, PG&E said that they made certain financial obligations on behalf of those customers. And now that their customers have left their system through this regulatory mechanism, they said those financial obligations go with you. In our case, our customers still have to bear that payment. And that basically means how much above or below market those resources that PG&E procured are at any given point in time. So if market prices go up, there's less less PCIA because those resources have become more valuable. So they're more in the money for PG&E. If market prices go down, PCIA goes up because PG&E says these resources are not as valuable because I'm committed to pay a high price for these resources, but in the market, the replacement cost of energy is a lot lower, right? So that's the PCIA concept. On the top, we serve a very competitive product. Customers can easily switch between us and a provider like PG&E, based on price. We have 2/3 of our load is served by commercial and industrial business customers, right? Very price sensitive. So we want to price at a competitive advantage to our competitor PG&E. So the rate PG&E charges also matters in this. So PG&E charges, we set a discount. So if either the PG&E rate, that bar comes down, only option we have to remain competitive is to shrink the blue box, which means our revenues. Or if PCIA goes up because market prices dropped, PCIA goes up, to remain competitive, we have to drop our rates, which means lower revenues for us. That's the message of this slide. You may say, well, if prices, so the impact, as I said, is prices coming down, which is when PCIA will go up and PG&E's generation rate will come down. You may say, but wouldn't we have lower power procurement costs? Yes, we would, but power procurement purchases, for most part, are hedged, or we have already existing PPAs committed to a prices, so they're not going to go down commensurately as much as our revenues are going to go down. And recently, the recent energy risk management policy adopted by the board, we have actually attempted to make some estimates and guess because the PCIA portfolio is unknown to us. So we try to capture to the extent we can some of that impact so that where we have room to adjust our procurement, we can lower it so we can benefit from that downward movement price in our power procurement portfolio when our revenues go down. So that's an adjustment we have made and we've talked about before. We'll go to the next slide. The two things that are bold here is what I want you to take away from this slide. Okay. When you have a good margin year, like this year is going to be good. You saw the mid-year budget forecast. We were projecting somewhere close to 90, upwards of 90 to $100 million addition to reserve. But you can never bank 1 year's reserves because these rates that I've talked about, PCIA and PG&E generation rates, when the CPUC, the regulatory body that sets these rates, they set it based on effectively a forecast for what they think market prices will be, in this case for 2025, year 2025. But then there's a balancing account that they hold where they will actually true up PCIA and PG&E's generation rate to what the actual realized prices are. And through that true up mechanism, even though we've had a good year because the rates are high, and PCIA, PG&E's rates are high, and PCIA is low, next year, because as is happening this year, prices have come down significantly. So even though PG&E hasn't lowered their rate and PCIA hasn't gone up, next year's PCIA will be affected not only by the forecast price of 2026, but by the true-up of 2025. So you can think of it, even though we're making money this year, part of that will be gone in this true-up mechanism. So 2 years, looking at 2 years financial outlook is very important to us because we cannot bank 1 year's financials. So that's an important concept from this slide. We'll go to the next slide. So now I'm going to make that comparison to the updated base case to what we shared with you at the mid-year. And basically what has happened since mid-year, prices have continued to come down. Okay, so go to the next slide. So here, the main thing, the blue, this is basically days cash on hand, which is another way of displaying our reserve levels. And the reserve levels are shown at the bottom of the table as well. The orange is basically the new updated base case that corresponds to the timing when we did the stress test analysis. And the blue is the mid-year. You can see this fiscal year actually shows higher, and that's because of the falling prices, because PG&E hasn't adjusted this year's rates. But we are realizing some of that savings to the extent we have flexibility in our power procurement portfolio, so that cost is coming down. So that's why this year is coming up a little bit higher. And through the way the rate making works, the 2-year cycle, the full brunt of some of the 2026 impact won't be borne until fiscal year 26-27. So looking at 2 fiscal years ahead. So what has happened is basically, so you can see over the 5-year horizon, the reserves are much lower now than at the mid-year, is market prices have come down. And I want to make a distinction here. What do I mean by market prices? The price of electricity at any given moment, in a 15-minute basis, in an hour basis, in the California CAISO, you can open up the app and see the price. That's not the price I'm talking about necessarily here. I'm talking about a forward price. So this is future period we're looking at, delivery for energy in future period. Those prices are also traded in the market, right? So when we go out and lock in a energy contract for next fiscal year, power procurement, there's a market price for that. And we call that a forward market price. So we are not doing a forecasting in-house. We're basically using what's, to the extent, observable market prices out there. And we obtain these from external sources. So that's what we use to basically build our forecasts. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So a little bit more on market prices. So forward prices, the dynamic of any forward price, not just in commodity, even more so in commodity, the further out in time, they're less liquid or illiquid. And what do I mean by that? That means there's less volume traded. Less volume traded means there's less price discovery. If we were to to look at forward prices from different entities for next month, delivery of energy for next month, that'll be very close. If we were to look at forward price interpretation for different entities for 5 years out, you see a very different number. And that's, again, has to do with price discovery. So there's uncertainty in these prices out there. And then there's another concept here I'd like to add. There's uncertainty in the price products. In energy, we deal with the energy prices. In our business, we deal with energy prices, and we deal with renewable portfolio standards, or the green attribute, RPS prices, and capacity prices, resource adequacy, RA prices, right? RPS and RA prices has had a huge impact on PG&E and PCIA in the last 2 years, if you remember some of the discussions we had at the budget time. These prices are even more illiquid because these are more thinly traded. And if you remember last year, we had a lot of discussions with the board about the difficulty meeting our clean target for the first time in 2024. There were some of that you can see the RPS price there, and carbon-free prices were doing the same thing. In a relatively short period of time between 23 and 24, these prices skyrocketed. Part of the reason is there's a RPS compliance. Okay, so that's part of the reason was a run-up in these prices. So the point here is these are illiquid prices. The illiquidity and this uncertainty basically translates into risk in our business, right? So that means we have to have the means, the financial means, to withstand this level of uncertainty that we face in our business. And you can see the RPS price and RA prices in the table there dropped significantly since the mid-year budget. And part of the reason that these prices can move so quickly in a relatively short period of time is because of this illiquid concept I talked about. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. And you can see this slide basically shows you that sometimes uncertainty doesn't always move in one direction. They can also go higher up. In risk management, we're concerned about the downside risk. In the last 2 years, and we talked about it at the budget setting time, we saw the energy prices coming down, and we're like, oh, okay, this could be a negative year. But then we saw huge run-up in RPS and RA prices, which actually made our bottom line much, much better than they otherwise would have been. And we talked about that as part of the reasons we moved some of the decisions in resetting the budget in December for this reason.
Jump to the market fundamentals and get to the.
Okay, yeah, we'll speed up. What time is it? Okay, so a lot of uncertainties here. I'm sure you guys have read through this. So there are other than market prices, but market prices are one of the biggest one. And we'll go to the next slide. So now I'll talk about the stress test construction, right? So what we have modeled is, and what analysis shows us is the biggest financial stress is if the market prices were to come down significantly. And that's what we've modeled. And in the next slide, we'll go to the next slide. We'll skip this one. What we're trying to demonstrate is how reasonable or how plausible. As I said, these are extreme scenarios, but plausible. So one way we're demonstrating plausibility is by making comparison to the 2008 financial crisis period, when in a relatively short period of time, energy prices dropped. And in the next slide, I'll show you that they dropped. These are forward prices. The top lines over there are forward prices. In a short period of time, they dropped significantly. And the comparison of 50 to 60% is from spot price, from a forward price to what the actual settled spot market prices were. And in our stress test that we're doing, we've dropped energy prices by, in the next slide, by 47%. So not that extreme. And this is how I'm saying what we're modeling, they're extreme. Sorry, they are extreme. We don't have financial crisis every time, but they can happen. And if they were to happen, I'll show you the impact on us. But they're plausible. These type of drops we have seen in our history. We'll go to the next slide. And similarly, we're monitoring drops in RPS and RA prices. And we'll go to the next slide. By the way, some of the y-axis were cut off on purpose because of sensitivity of displaying forward market price data. So that was done on purpose. Okay, so now I get to compare the base case to the stress case. So you can see this is under the business as we currently operate, which is where we want to maintain a competitive advantage to PG&E. We're assuming in the stressful scenario, we would move to a discount rate to a 1% going forward, starting calendar year 2026. For the remainder of this fiscal year and the beginning of the first 3 months of the next fiscal year, October to December of 2025, we would keep at the 4%, continue to fund our programs, continue to spend the earmarked funds. These include earmarked funds in them. I haven't taken them out, but they do take into account the projected spend of those accumulated earmarked funds of $100 million that we had shared with you at the mid-year budget. The bottom line here is, thanks to the way we've been managing our reserves, we are financially well positioned. This is what we have designed our financials to withstand. What the forward market is indicating is a downward movement in market prices that's going to impact us financially. But even if the stressful scenario were to occur, we're well positioned, because even in the base case, the next 2 years we were above 350 at or close to 350, slightly above 350 days of cash on hand. And all 5-year forecast period, we stay above the 120 days of cash on hand. And under the stress scenario, we still stay above the minimum, and actually through the next 2 fiscal year, even ending through fiscal year 26, 27, close to 200 days of cash on hand. And remember, I talked about the 2 years being the most important in our financial projection. So we'll go to the next slide. I'm going to skip the recap. These are the messages I have shared in each of the slides. The key being, we manage risk on an ongoing basis. Market prices have the big impact. We've got to pay attention to 5 years, but next 2 years are most critical, and that's how we do the financial planning. Next slide. So all those points leads us to this recommendation. So for the upcoming budget, setting of the development of the budget, we're forecasting, given that the reserves on a base case basis remains at or above 350 days of cash on hand, that at this time we don't take any major changes in setting the September budget. We're financially well prepared. This is what we've been planning for. We took the good years and we built the reserves to withstand these type of model scenarios. As always, we will adjust the budget in December when we have more certainty on next year's rates. And now that the 5-year outlook indicates a shift in the financial period profile that we've enjoyed in the last few years, to a shift from, instead of adding to reserves, potentially pulling from reserves. So we think now is the time for us at a staff level to start looking at some of the financial levers. And that's what the reserve is meant to be, right? Give you opportunity to adapt and be strategic rather than have to make drastic changes and not be strategic in how we take the next steps in our business. Because a lot of the business we do takes time with our customers, the momentum we build up. So reserves gives us that opportunity to be very strategic and thoughtful and not be subject to the near-term ups and downs of the market. So that's what that opportunity gives us. And with that opportunity, we would like to probably do some internal analysis on what some of the levers are, and some of them I've listed on that slide there. And I think that concludes my presentation. I think these were backup slides.
Thank you, Amrit. Are there questions from directors? Director Walia?
Thank you. Amrit, thank you so much for walking us through that. And it's imperative that we look at that, because otherwise the entity may or may not be stable. So this is critical. Very simple clarifying question. On slide 10, you pointed out that in 2024, the RPS and RA prices were very high, and then there was almost like dropping off a cliff to starting in fall of 2024. Why did that happen? And of course, the focus is how to avoid that happening or how to be better prepared next time. So why did that happen?
I mean, this is development in market. This is a lot of uncertainties I've talked about. Part of them being these are illiquid products, and the big part also is what we saw in 2024. And Monica and can probably speak more to this from the energy procurement side. And remember, this is also what led us to the difficulty in filling our clean position. Is there was a huge run-up for clean resources, part of it being 24 being a RPS compliance, where people had to meet their target to show that they were at 40% RPS. So there was a lot of demand to be in compliance. And then there was a lot of activities happening in the Northwest, a lot of corporate entities taking up RPS positions. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, with respect to resource adequacy, I think same thing. There was just scarcity in the market, and so that resulted in a run-up of the price. We were also coming into our very first year under a new resource adequacy structure called Slice of Day. So, the market, because of the way that Slice of Day is structured, we actually had to buy more resource adequacy capacity to cover our needs. And so it's just simple supply and demand. And we can't really control it unless we build resources.
Okay, and again, that's the reason why we look at the future. The past helps us predict, or rather be better prepared for the future.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Elahi?
Thank you. I appreciate you going through the analysis on the stress test. And basically, the stress is based on prices going up or going down or changing. The only thing you're looking at stressing is what it costs us or what it costs everybody else to buy electricity. But these are not, that would be okay in normal times, but I don't think these are normal times. So let's take a horrible example like the fire down south, where whole cities get burned, or up in Paradise. If that happens, shouldn't that be part of something you consider, that you have a wholesale block of cities burning down and the capacity, the load factor goes down? I guess we are committed to buying certain amount of power, regardless of whether we use it or not. And I suppose you're not close to the 100% load yet. But would you think that'd be worth considering? Or let's take LA, what's happening down there. First things like that happen. Shouldn't we be considering some of those outside factors also?
Absolutely. As I said, in our enterprise risk management, these are not the only risk. In terms of financial risk that can have a severe financial impact, this one is a big impact on us, is prices coming down because of the mechanisms I talked about in impacting revenue. But there are other stresses, and in the past we've done like cybersecurity risk. Last year we did long-term load uncertainty risk. But to answer your question about the fire risk, a lot of those risks, can be short-term deviations in load that may not have that big of a financial impact on a long-term basis, but they can bankrupt wires and distribution businesses like PG&Es because of inverse condemnation laws and so on.
Yeah, so I'm just raising it. I'm sure you've considered it.
Yeah.
And the other issue, obviously, is we only have one supplier, in a sense, PG&E. I mean, we're depending on them to supply our energy to the consumer.
Deliver our energy.
Or deliver it, or make it possible, enable it. Should some consideration be made? Like you said, if PG&E goes bankrupt or goes under, would that be part of a stress test, or is that just too remote?
Yeah, I think we've kind of lived through that stress test as well. PG&E has been bankrupt, and the big uncertainty there is their cash register, but it's proven through the regulatory mechanism has withheld that we were still able to get our funding even when they were going through bankruptcy.
Understood. So I'll just raise it as a challenge. Maybe we should consider buying out some portions of PG&E to reduce our risk in some states. I don't know when you're going to be ready for that, but maybe that should be a long-term goal.
Thank you, Director. Director Rennie?
I'll put all the question in one, I guess. So when is the end of our next compliance period? We saw at the end of the current compliance period, prices go up for RA and the other one I'm forgetting. And your prices here assume those are now down sort of forever, and I'm wondering if we might see the same thing at the end of the next compliance period where everybody else kind of backed off, not procuring enough and then ended up backloading it again. So first, when is the end of the next compliance period, and is it possible that we'll actually see a repeat of the same structure again?
Yeah, I believe this next compliance period is a 3-year period, so it would be the end of 27. And I think the one big difference or the advantage that a lot of the load-serving entities have for this compliance period versus the last one is that we spent a lot of time building new resources. And so a lot of us were trying to meet that SB 350 requirement where you had to have 65% of your RPS under long-term contracts. That was the one that was really hard to meet. And so because we now have had almost a decade worth of time to procure, I think we're in a much better place than where we were before at the end of 2024. For resource adequacy, that's just an annual requirement we have to keep meeting. But I will say that the other pressure that's going to be put on prices is meeting the SB 100 requirements, where we have to get to 100% clean by 2045, and all the interim targets that exist before 2045 as well. And so that'll put pressure on RPS prices as well.
Okay, I'm just testing your forecast prediction because it looks like it goes down, but there could be reasons for it to come back up.
I will just add, these are what we observe in the marketplace. So we don't forecast for this time period, the 5-year period. And this is what we get from external sources as to best indication of where the market is. But as I said, these are not that liquid markets. So these prices can be very volatile. They can go up or down because they're very thinly traded. There's not as robust price discovery is another way of saying it.
Okay, and again, my point is some of those entities may not be planning as well for the next period and then end up having to backload quickly.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director. Any other questions from directors? Director Barbadillo?
With regards to CCAs, is there a recommended benchmark to maintain some unrestricted general reserves? Cities, I believe it's like 17%.
There's no agreed upon standard, but every CCA maintains a healthy level of reserves given the volatility that we have in our business. So I think it's on their website. Some target to maintain 180 days, some much higher than that. We have maintained fairly high levels. We've also done this extensive stress test analysis. And we'll also stress test is not just one component in how we set our reserve targets. We also take indications from credit rating agencies. They've also come in and indicated 350 target days and have actually increased our rating recently, given our reserves. So, which also lowers our procurement cost, because when we transact with counterparties, when they see they're trading with a creditworthy counterparty, they're able to transact with us in favorable terms. They can also give us a better unsecured line of credit, which means basically, we don't have to post collateral, which can further squeeze our liquidity. And also CAISO, California Independent System Operator, has significantly increased our unsecured line of credit recently based on our financials.
So am I hearing it's just case-to-case basis, what a CCA would maintain as unrestricted reserves? There's no standard?
I think there's general standard in that everyone maintains a good level of reserves. And some some may not be in position to have cash reserves. They may hold bank line of credits as we did in our initial startup period to boost liquidity in case we have this, these whims in the market, adverse movements in market. There was a line of credit at the bank facility, which comes at considerable cost, that we could draw on.
Okay. Just a thought, from the last item that we have, we're talking about savings, millions of savings, and then suddenly now we're talking about drawing from reserves going forward and reducing the discount to 1%. So I can't connect the dots.
So they're sort of independent.
Right.
One is, let's say if we didn't do the prepay, we would not have those savings. These financials would be $14 million worse off.
Hold on. Sorry, I just used the last item to emphasize the point. What I'm saying is now that we did the stress test, we're figuring out that, hey, we have to put more on reserves, or, we have to draw now from our reserves to maintain stability. We have to reduce now the 4% discount to our stakeholders to 1%.
So we're not recommending that. I think that what his analysis shows is if we were under a stress condition, then one action that the board might take is to reduce that discount from 4% to 1%. That's always going to be a board decision. He's just saying from illustrative purposes, if I reduce, if
we're
we...
not talking about illustrative purposes, these are studies,
Director, just keep in mind, the stress test is trying to do a crystal ball of what changes might affect how we get energy in the market as a whole. So it's not a recommendation at this point, and ultimately that's why having healthy reserves from an organizational standpoint is important, because it's like, as opposed to, well, we should keep no reserves and assume that the ongoing like the yearly savings is going to cover everything. And so that balance this board needs to make to try to make sure that we cover both the decarbonization focus as well as the rates with a changing market. And so the yearly stress test is just for our benefit to try to figure out what might affect the organization over the next year, 2 years, 3 or 4 years.
Right. So the stress test is the basis for our 5-year projection.
Correct.
So it's not an
No, we do a base case, as I showed you, a base case, which is where the market is with all the uncertainties baked into the market prices. And we talked about it. They can go up, they can go down. It's not that they will always go down. There's two sides to the distribution of prices, right? There's a right side and a left side. They can go up. But we have to plan for the uncertainty. The stress case says, what if some of the very unlikely, as I said, extreme, but if they were to occur, what means do we have to withstand it? Because one of those things can wipe you out. Lehman Brothers no longer exists in business, right? They cannot serve their mission. So these are industry standard type of analysis you would do given our nature of our business. So this is not a recommendation for rate setting. That will come at the budget. We will do so at the December, as we've always done, when there's more certainty on next year's rates. That's when we will make the recommendation, the actual recommendation to the board, and the board will decide what the discount should be.
Are there similar industry like us that their commodities are very volatile and deals the same way as we're trying to
Yeah, any commodity business, this is very common practice. I gave you an example of banks. I think they may be even required under regulatory rules. I'm not from that industry. Maybe David Sim knows. I gave you an example that one of the failures in risk management cited for Silicon Valley Bank. They should have stressed their portfolio. What if interest rates had gone up? When the interest rates all of a sudden did start going up due to economic conditions, they got in financial trouble. So there are a lot of other areas that are subject to market risks that do this practice.
Okay. And last one note, and this is a recommendation, right? We did this with our city. We currently pass a balanced budget. Initially, we were projecting a structural deficit. The way we address the first 2 years of possible structural deficit is in-house. We look at cost allocation, and we did house cleaning, and what I'm saying is the hierarchy of where you're gonna draw possible shortcomings of the budget is not directly to the reserves. If we can have that, not policy, vision, that the last thing to touch is the reserves, and let's see other, sources of buckets, I think that's a prudent way to proceed.
And that goes to the recommendation I was getting at, that we're going to look at other levers so that we have done some analysis and we can inform the board. But I do want to remind that when we look at our cost, 90% of our portfolio cost of a business is energy procurement.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Director Rennie?
Could you pull up slide 21? So I find this the most interesting slide because the orange lines, the light orange, maybe the other's orange too, I don't know. The light orange is our base case of if, stress doesn't occur. And it says we're okay for a couple years, and it kind of if nothing changes over time, our stresses are exactly the same. It tells me when we reach around reserves of 284 million, we're now right on the edge of a stress wiping us out, right? You see in year 28, 29, when we're down to 205, a stress could now wipe us out completely. And so I like looking at this chart because it says, yeah, we're fine for a while. When we start coming down, it tells us about when we really need to start changing some levers. And of course, the stresses could all change in the future. But my point is we look like we're okay for a while, and it tells me something about when we need to make it a big decision.
Yes, that's a very good point. And that's the purpose of the reserves. It buys us time to be more strategic and thoughtful. I'll just make one analogy. In the financial crisis, Lehman no longer exists. They were the first one hit, but other banks have survived.
Thank you, Director Rennie. I see no other questions from the board. Let's go ahead and open public comment. I see no people in the room. Is there anyone remote wishing to speak on this?
No hands raised, Chair.
Thank you very much. And this is just from a discussion. And Amrit, thank you for the presentation. It is a complex topic. Thank you, directors, for your questions. And thank you to, of course, the finance and administration subcommittees for kind of going through this, previously and doing a deeper dive. We've done a lot of effort here, but they spend a lot more focused questions outside of this meeting. So thank you all for your service to that subcommittee also. Okay. Thank you, Amrit. We'll move on to our next item. Item 5 authorizes the CEO to execute the agreement for planning, architecture, and design services for Silicon Valley Clean Energy Headquarters.
All righty.
And Jessica, you're up first, or is it? Jessica, go ahead.
She said 4 minutes. All righty. Good evening, board. My name is Jess Cornejo, and I'm the Senior Community Strategy Specialist at SVCE, and I am part of the internal team working to bring our headquarters to life. Next slide. So to start for this item, we are requesting that the board allow the CEO to negotiate, execute, and allow change orders to a contract for planning, architectural, and design services for our new headquarters with an NTE of $660,000. We are coming to the board today because we will need to execute a contract before the end of the month, so the end of June, to stay on track with having the building ready for staff move-in for early next year. Next slide. So we have been moving swiftly on this effort, and we released the architectural RFP in early May with a deadline for the middle of May. And lastly, we held interviews at the end of May as well. So a pretty fast moving RFP. I will note that we received about 11 proposals and interviewed 6 firms. Many of the firms were strong candidates, but we ultimately decided to select one, which we are currently refining the scope of work as well as working on the contract negotiations. During the interview process, we did assess firms based on cost effectiveness, alignment with SVCE's mission, completeness of proposal, as well as their team's experience as well. Next slide. So during the board feedback session that we held on Wednesday, May 14th, as well as the firm interviews, it was clear that it was best to phase this project into 2 different areas. The first phase will prioritize the staff workspace as well as the board chamber, while phase 2 will consist of the community space. This will give staff more time to assess the resources needed to bring the community space to life, as well as allow flexibility for staff to move in. The listed scope items cover the services that will include design, permitting, and construction activities, as well as engineering services like mechanical, plumbing, and electrical work as well. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, we're moving quite swiftly on this, and we are making progress. This is the tentative timeline that lists the anticipated high-level items for the remainder of this year, as well as into next. While the bulk of the planning activities will happen before the end of the year, I did want to highlight that we plan to release another solicitation for a construction contractor, and we'll return to the board with options for the community space as well at a later time. Much of the construction will begin in 2026 with ideal move-in by Q3 of next year. Next slide. So for the immediate next steps, as I mentioned, staff is finalizing the scope of work as well as the contract negotiations with the recommended architecture firm. And so next slide, Andrea. So to close with our initial request, we would like the board to delegate authority to the CEO to execute the contract with the recommended architectural firm. And with that, we do have our building project manager, Cumming Group, on the call today, as well as Zoe Elizabeth in person to help support and answer any questions that you all might have.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Zoe, did you have anything to add first?
Nope.
Okay. Do the directors have any questions? Director Walia?
Thank you for your presentation, Jess. And 2 quick questions. Zoe, I had asked you a question earlier, and I just saw a 11th hour question, clarification. If you could talk about that here, because that was one of the key things I heard. And the second quick question, a confirmation possibly. When I was reading the details of this, the project team that is working on it will be getting 2 concept designs and then you will finalize. Is that part of the process? To give you flexibility to find the right decision. I was going through the details. So two questions. First is the email that I already sent you.
Yep. So one of the questions are, I'll just kind of repeat back. Director Wally had asked a question. We shared the RFP with you all that outlined some of the kind of outline for the vision and concepts that would be included in the final design. One of them was around the board chambers, and we included options for the board chambers. That RFP went out prior to our board input session. At the board input session, we got clear input that there's a preference for a raised dais versus kind of the other options. So as we move forward with the architect, that option for a raised dais as well as the other input will be communicated as the preferred option going forward.
all of the kind of final design decisions, of course, will need to go through cost estimation and will kind of be related to different areas and aspects of the space. So we go in with, hey, here's our preferred options, and then the architects and ourselves will kind of make a final decision based on a variety of factors.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So thank you. So basically what the feedback that day was pretty much, in fact, like this, an arc shape, as we talked about there, even though we were not sitting in this room, that the Cupertino Council Chambers is very functional from that angle. So that is what will be the direction given moving forward.
Yeah, we've included this as the preferred option for the architects to have a raised dais as part of the design process.
Okay.
We're going to have to kind of include all sorts of different things in terms of how that ultimately that space will be used to ensure that it's flexible, and then of course cost considerations for all of these things. So I'm just being cautious. I don't want to commit to saying we're going to do any specific design thing in this moment because all of those things will be considered, but that is listed as the preferred option.
Thank you. Sounds wonderful. So the second clarification that I was asking, I read somewhere in the documents, I don't know, staff report or RFP part, that there would be 2 design concepts that are required for the team to present to the project management team. I'm being very clear, not the board. I'm not asking for that. So that you get to choose what works best based on all the other factors that you just listed out.
Yes, as we kind of go through the options with the design team, they will actually probably list several options for the different areas of space, which we would then select from. Throughout the process, we'll also, through this expertise of Coming Group, be including cost estimation services. And so that will also go into the key part of the decision-making as we look through the different options.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Scazola?
Thank you. Yes, I was just curious, while interviewing the potential contractors, were labor standards one of the main things that were looked at?
So I'm going to answer this, and then Joe from Coming Group, if there's additional detail that I missed, please jump in. So the construction contract will need to be a public works project that adheres to strict labor standards. The architecture contract does not follow those same state laws.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Director Showalter?
Yeah, when I read through the staff report about the phase 2, where you talk about the public spaces, there wasn't a lot in that yet, which is reasonable. But I just wanted to reiterate that we seemed to discuss that we wanted to have a space that was very welcoming and fun and upbeat. And I didn't see those kind of concepts in there. And I just wanted to reiterate that I don't think I was the only person who thought that was a good idea. And I just wanted to restate that, because we want a place, or I want a place, I hope everyone want a place where the public feels welcome and they want to come in and learn about how we meet our mission and get on board to help us do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for adding that, and we definitely documented that, and we'll continue to. Probably didn't include it in the staff report because that area of the community space, we realized we want to just have additional time to work through. But yes, thank you for reading.
I think this is a great project. I think we're all really pleased that it's happening, and in a sense that we get to have a little piece in it. It's very exciting.
Thank you, Director. And on that note, that would be coming back to us in Q4 to do options and ultimately looking at that community space in detail and conceivably the options of what this board would like to see and what the costs are. Well, I think it's going to be the big thing, correct?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And that was also one of the reasons is we wanted to ensure that we could move forward with the office space, but come back and continue with an iterative process on the community space in particular.
Fantastic. I see no other questions from directors. Oh, yes? No? Okay. No. And I see no public in the room. I'll open up public comment. Is there any remote participant who wishes to speak under public comment?
Okay. Yep.
No
No?
speakers.
Okay. Thank you. Director Showalter.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Please conduct the voice vote.
Vice Chair Klein?
Aye.
Dr. Scozola?
Aye.
Mohan?
Aye.
Meadows?
Aye.
Swan?
Aye.
Rennie?
Aye.
Barbadillo?
Aye.
Elahi?
Aye.
Showalter?
Aye.
Walia?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Hilton?
Aye.
Martinez Patran?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And I know we're a little past time. That being said, we don't have a meeting next month. And so hopefully people, if you need to leave, go ahead. This is just an informational update. But ultimately, I think staff would like to do it now as opposed to August. Zoe, local agency action planning.
Fantastic. And I will zip through this. Thank you all so much for those of you who were able to attend our great event a couple weeks ago. Much of this will be kind of a repetition of this. There is one time-sensitive item. I'm just going to follow up on something that Benna said earlier. So you can go to the next slide, Andrea. Next slide. Next slide. I've shared this information, but just keep remembering the power of the impact of your work. Next slide. Okay. So this is the highlight here of what we showed and discussed at the last meeting. In the last several months, we kind of talk about the big menu of options that we've provided to each of our jurisdictions. This slide is meant to really simplify the key actions that each of your jurisdictions can take over the next several months to continue to move forward towards pollution-free buildings. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. And this slide, I think, is really exciting. This shows we've done 13 action plans. I showed you that pyramid. These are the key actions. And then this shows which of the jurisdictions have listed kind of each of those actions. And yes, Director Walia, you can see Saratoga and Director Scholerter, Mountain View have dots in all 4 of those columns, although everybody's a leader in this instance, but just want to give that extra shout out. But towards the point that Benna made earlier, we all know we've been watching AB 306 with some concern that there would be a limitation on the ability for cities to take these actions. While that is still in process, the amendments that just came out basically extend the deadline for cities to be able to take action to October 1st. In the last several REACH code cycles, many of our cities had adopted REACH codes by October 1st. And so we want to let you know that we are poised. We have model codes written. We have our technical folks in place, as well as our internal team. For any cities that are interested in adopting these codes by October 1st, we're ready and poised to support you. And it may end up being the last time to do this before 2032. So good motivation to kind of move quickly if this is the direction that you want to go in. So Tony, Napor, and Jessica will be reaching out to individually to each of your staff, and I'm also available to speak and help any of you as well as your fellow council members as needed in the next couple months. And I think that's it. Happy to take questions.
Thank you,
Last
Zoe.
slide.
Any director questions? I see none. I'll open up for public comment. I see no one in the room wishing to speak. Is there anyone remote wishing to speak on this?
No hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the board, Director Walia.
Thank you so much, Chair. Zoe, very, very quickly, huge thanks. This has taken the last 2 years' efforts of working with the cities, especially City of Saratoga. I know I've mentioned many times, short-staffed and a lot of work, especially in the Community Development Department. The fact that you mentioned Saratoga's name today, you recall in the last few years that has never happened. And it has not happened, not because Saratoga didn't want it. It has happened today because SVCE made it possible. I really cannot thank you enough for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Showalter.
Yeah, I want to follow on to that. Yesterday, we approved our inventory, our annual inventory. And when we look at what has saved us the most greenhouse gas, it's because we have clean electricity. It just makes such a huge difference in us meeting our goals. And also all of the, as we learned at the special meeting, was that a couple weeks ago? the impacts of these REACH codes just grow and grow and grow. So these things are very important. And I don't want to forget to thank Justin for coming to Mountain View yesterday. And he had to do some speed talking because we were kind of late in the meeting when we got to the public comment. But it was really nice to have a handout that was specialized to Mountain View about what the advantage of being in Silicon Valley clean energy was and what we had accomplished by doing that. And I know that you're doing that for each and every municipality, and that's really important. So I just wanted to thank you for making that effort and showing up. I mean, it's one thing to put it on your website. That's great. We all want it on the website so people can look at it. But I think having a live person come to a meeting and talk, it just has a lot of impact. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Elahi?
Thank you. Yeah, I also wanted to thank you. I think we had, I think you showed up at Montessorino, so appreciate that. And I just wanted to be clear. The only thing we can do, but the additional reach code that we need to do is have a electrification for remodeling. For cities like Montessorino. We've done everything else. So that's the one item that's left.
Yes.
Is there anything else?
Remodels and readiness. The three options are kind of different forms of a remodel code at different triggers. Sometimes it's just as simple as when you're replacing your air conditioning. Sometimes it's for more detailed remodels. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, directors. I will move on to board member announcements and direction on future items. Any comments? Director Walia?
Again, thank you. Just a huge thanks. Saratoga is beyond thrilled in the competitive grant that SVCE had put out. The board had approved in October 2024. Saratoga was awarded $493,000, I think, to upgrade our city facilities to electrify them and also have the historic home, not just getting electrified, but to be a showcase for community engagement. This is huge beyond words. I've said this many times. My city has rich CEOs, but the city does not have the resources. We don't have the resources to upgrade our infrastructure. Residents are thrilled beyond words when they saw that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to thank you and thank our executive director and thank the team for coming out to our opening of our first electric firehouse in Morgan Hill. It was amazing, and people have been buzzing about it for a while. Really excited. It's a beautiful building. We couldn't have done it without Silicon Valley Clean Energy and the support that they have given us to go all electric, not only saving money for the city, but definitely getting our mission out there. In fact, this firehouse has a educational piece to it that faces kind of the walkway into downtown, where it's a children's space where they can learn about clean energy, and it has like a little demonstration of a kitchen. So it was a really exciting time this weekend, and I want to thank you for coming down to Morgan Hill and being there, and you as well, Monica. Thank you so much. Really appreciated that.
Thank you, Director. Thank you for hosting SVCE and myself for the ribbon cutting for the Butterfield Fire Station. Thank you to the directors tonight for indulging me, for giving me an extra 15 minutes out of your life. Sorry we went a little bit long. I just want to also thank, after the ribbon cutting in Morgan Hill, I rushed back to Sunnyvale for the Art and Wine Festival, and thank you to SVCE staff for educating and having one of the booths at our Art and Wine Festival last weekend. It was fantastic. And lastly, I just wanted to thank Director Mohan and Cupertino for providing the chambers for the last few years. And this is our last meeting in this room. Our next meeting in August will be at the Sunnyvale Chambers, Sunnyvale City Hall, as this building starts some renovations. So thank you. Director Mohan?
I just wanted to say, not that we don't want you here, but we did want to make some significant upgrades to this building.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting at 9:15 p.m. Thank you for everyone who attended, and we will see you in August. Thank you.
Have a good summer, everyone.
Yeah, no, that's okay.